everything from day one is a negotiation. I'd say to not fall into the trap of thinking I need to manage the customer and then we're going to get to negotiations. And so I think just to know that when you start, like the game's already started. It's not, okay, I'm going to do all this stuff and then I'll play the game. And so one thing that I work with my team on, and I try to be cognizant of myself too, is never give anything away for free. Always make sure you're getting something back. And it doesn't have to be monetary. Most times it's not money. Hey, could we get this feature request approved or something like that? It's like, great. Happy, would you be open to setting up 5 or 10 minutes to bring in your team so that I can bring in my team, walk them through it? You just want to get commitments every time that they ask you for something too. This comes up a lot, I think, more acutely when it comes to renewals, right? Hey, we want 20% off. Great. I can't just get 20% off blanketly approved. Can you walk me through what's driving, this initiative or what's causing you to ask for the discount? And then going back and saying, hey, we probably can't meet you at 20. There's a couple levers we can play with, things like promotions, case studies, term length, payment terms, options, right? So never just saying yes without also getting them to concede on something else. Works the best when it comes to timing. So whenever someone wants to ask for something, I always say it's easier for me to get approval if I have a commitment on when it can be done by. So hey, let's say we can give you 20% off. You agreed that you can shift from quarterly to upfront billing. I don't want to go make this ask until I know that this gets it done. So if we can do these things, what else needs to happen on your end, right? You let me know what's a realistic date for us to pin on this, but I need a date or a commitment before I go make the ask. So you're giving them what they want. It just comes with a contingency. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing I work with my team is never just give. Always make sure they're coming back with something. It could be time, it could be introduction, it could be terms. There's so many things that might be cheap for them to give that might be very valuable for you. People have had maybe negative experiences with quote unquote pushy salespeople or things like that in our life. We almost have like a natural I don't want them to feel like I'm always trying to sell them something. I think a better way to think about it is they're not buying something one-off from you, right? They're investing in your product because the product should be returning 10x the value that they're paying for. And so if you're fulfilling that promise, you should have zero guilt in trying to go back and solve a bigger problem for them from then on out. So a good example is like a money manager or someone that said, hey, give me $100, I'll turn it to 500. Great. If they do it, perfect time to say, hey, if you give me another $100, I'll turn it to $1,000, right? Like if you're not delivering on the initial promise, it's very hard to then go back and push other products or solutions to the customer. But I'd say when you're doing your success mapping with customers, anytime you hit a big milestone where you've helped unlock value, it's a really good time to say, hey, that's typically phase 1 or step 1 of how we do this. Now that we're here, I've noticed you mentioned X, Y, and Z could be a problem as well. Does it make sense to explore some ways that we've helped other people do that too? So I'd say always kind of ride positive momentum and then anchor it in your company or your ability to actually deliver on those promises to the customer. Just don't be afraid to ask for what you want or what you need, right? Oftentimes as CSM, you're not setting the rules. You're not saying you can't have a 20% discount. It's finance saying you can't discount past 10%. So you should have zero guilt to just represent, hey, I can't discount more than 10% unless, these 2 or 3 things can change, right? So I think just being very matter of fact, not being afraid to not tell someone what they want to hear. You can typically push people a lot further in a negotiation than you think. I think oftentimes we get scared, if I throw out this high price or if I don't say yes, they're just going to walk away. It takes a lot to make somebody walk away. And even when they do walk away, you can always say, hey, actually, let me see what I can do. And they'll sit back down. So you have a lot more rope to play with than I think we do when we start. I think one of the challenges of CS is there's been such underinvestment in training and education over the years, but there's been an incredible amount of investment and training with sales teams. So LinkedIn, there's a ton of influencers that are great to follow. They're always producing great content on how to close, how to negotiate, managing give gets, all this type of stuff. So I would just steal as much of that as possible and then adapt it to your customers and your way. I think the one book that's really helped me a lot has been Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He was an FBI hostage negotiator where the stakes couldn't have been higher. And a lot of the techniques that he walks through when he uses translates really well in much lower stake environments. And so I'd say lean into a lot of the stuff that's been created for salespeople on how to negotiate deals, because that translates oftentimes one-to-one with techniques that you can use on post-sale as well.